Welcome to Tales from Flat Space, a podcast of science fiction and fantasy by yours truly, Gina A. Pond. Just know that the stories in this podcast may contain content that could be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. So this is Colony, Part 2, Geneva Colony, Chapter 20, Marcus. 2 weeks after I returned from New York Colony, I was in my quarters on Sun Tzu, staring at myself in the mirror when the door chimed. "Come in," I said absently, as I continued to poke and prod at my new face. "Well, they certainly made you prettier to match me," said Lulu behind me. I rolled my eyes. "I'm glad you approve." "I do," she said, coming fully into the room. "The first time is always the weirdest, so I'm not surprised that you're in front of the mirror. Just don't spend all day there." I turned my head back and forth. "How do you get used to it?" I asked, watching her through the mirror. She shrugged. "I've been doing this since I was 14, so I just am. I'm always me in my head, regardless of what my face looks like. You have to live with the new face for at least a year, so it's not so bad. There's only a few of us who change our faces often, and those of us that do usually don't really have the emotional capacity to be freaked out by it. Some don't do it at all, like John Smith." "Really?" "Nope. John Smiths are cultivated for being an everyman-looking type anyway, and for being narcissistic." She sat at the table. "We need to talk, Marcus. That's why I'm here." "Oh?" I said, having an idea about what she wanted to talk about. I sat down across from her. Lulu frowned. "Marcus, please. There's no need to be shy about it. You've known me long enough." "Well, yeah, true," I said. "So, we'll be traveling as a married couple. We have to act like we're in love in public, and I'll probably be a bit obnoxious about it. What I remember about Geneva Colony is that polyamorous families are tolerated, but monogamous couples are more accepted. It'll probably be easier to just tell people that I'm a debutante from New York Colony, especially if you act like a Genovian. Since you are a Genovian, more or less, that should be easy enough." I nodded. "That makes sense. I can do that. As far as sex goes, well, I'd be up for having sex with you if you're able to not get emotional about it. You're a bit vanilla for me, but I do like sex. The thing is, I can't give you anything resembling any kind of relationship. I am a sociopath and a psychopath, and, well, you're not. It would be bad for you, and I don't want to hurt you. And you've been in Survey long enough to know that consent is everything." I sighed. I stared at her for a moment. Lulu stared back. It may not be the same face as it was in New York, but her eyes were the same. There was no judgment about my sexual preferences, just a frank honesty about who she was and what she couldn't offer. It still felt like a rejection, which seemed to poke something emotionally, but I put it aside. I cleared my throat. "Well, I think it might be best to not have sex, as much as part of me would like to, especially since we're working on a mission together." She smiled a friendly smile. "Good, then that's that. We could, if anyone asks, say that we have an agreement. Like I said, polyamory is still okay." "I think that would work for me. No need to deny ourselves fun if someone comes along," I said, remembering Levy at Geneva Station. I could feel her staring at me again. "Okay, who are you thinking about?" Levy at Geneva Station." "Did he take you out for a fondue?" Yeah. How did you know?" She smiled wider. "General dining room or the private dining room?" "Private?" I said, growing suspicious. "Ooh, he really likes you, and he definitely wants you to come back and see him." I perked up. "Really?" Lulu nodded. He only reserves the private dining room for VIPs and people he really likes. From what I've heard, it's been a while since he's brought a non-VIP into the private room. My face flushed hot. Lulu laughed. You do turn a lovely shade of pink when you blush. Shame you don't lead my way. I'd love to put you over my knee. I didn't think my cheeks could get any hotter. I decided to change the subject. Have you heard from Jenny? Not since she got picked up by the cruiser. I think she was still in shock when she left, and by now she'll be training hard and getting her enhancements. I think she'll probably be fast-tracked too, since the rumor is that the current admiral is dying. I widened my eyes. Really? I didn't realize he was that old. She shook her head. He's not. Apparently he's gotten to a point where survey therapies don't work on whatever it is he's dying of anymore, and he doesn't have much time left. I don't know any more details. Musashi's people won't say anything, and neither will the AIs. Even John Smith is quiet about it. Shit, I said. Is she going to have time to train at all? I don't know, Lulu replied, but she'll get her enhancements, and she'll have Musashi to help her out. He's got over 500 years of experience, and the experiences of all the former admirals. Jenny will be all right. I don't envy her the job, especially with Unity being such a pain in the ass. We kind of started it, she said, getting up from the chair and heading to the printer. She dialed in something and it began printing. Ordered you a shake, she said. I was about to tell her I didn't need anything, but then my stomach rumbled. Thanks. The printer finished and she handed me one of the shakes. Listen, she said, standing next to the table. I like you, you're a friend, and I will do whatever I have to do to keep you safe while you figure out what this chaos program thing is doing and trace it to its source. I know how to deal with people, and I'm your muscle. You'll need to trust me to do what I do best, okay? I took a deep breath. Did I trust her? She'd never lie to me, and hadn't thrown herself at me. She respected Jenny's vows while we were all together. As much as she could be obnoxious, she was also professional and loyal to those she cared about. Okay, I will. Good, Lulu said. Then let's find this son of a bitch and take him out. I raised my cup. She returned the salute and left. There are a number of communiques and credits flowing towards Geneva Colony, but it's being put into shell companies and private accounts that seem to be randomly owned, Sun Tzu said, as we analyzed the data together. You were right. It's not enough to be obvious, but once you know what to look for, it's pretty clear that the origin is somewhere on Geneva Colony. Yes, but it looks like Chaos is putting up roadblocks every place where someone could possibly get an exact address or person. Like it's protecting its creator, or creators. We'll still have to dig into the systems on New Zurich in person. I sighed as I sat back in my chair. We'll have to be careful, though, as Chaos may come after us. My scenarios seem to indicate that as a possibility as well, said Sunny. I'm not sure I like sending you and Lulu in nearly blind, though. Even Control is having difficulty seeing the whole pattern when it comes to Chaos. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Even with the new data from Lazarus? Yes, there are too many variables in play. I sighed. Can't be helped, Sonny. Lulu and I will have to find it on the ground. I stood up and stretched. You should go to bed, Marcus. It's late, said the AI. I don't know if I can sleep, I said. I've mostly been eating and sleeping since the surgery and crunching data in between. I feel like I'm not doing enough. If we had the source code. I sighed. But we don't. And the only real clue is that all signs are pointing to Geneva. I should be able to see it. You may be enhanced, Marcus, but you are only one human. Even Control rests. I nodded. You're right, Sonny, I said, scrubbing my face with my hands. I'll talk to you tomorrow then. When's the courier coming? In 2 days. We've gone over this data extensively, Marcus. I suggest you take the next couple of days off. There's nothing more you can find by staring at the same data for hours on end. Besides, you haven't had time to yourself for nearly 9 months. That's not healthy. I opened my mouth and closed it. Does anyone else tell you that you're persistent? Sun Tzu chuckled. All the time. Good night, Marcus. Good night, I said, conceding, and walked out of the data lab. I turned down the hall towards my quarters, but I was feeling restless, so I turned around and wandered towards the entertainment quarter of the ship instead. There were restaurants, bars, gaming, spas, and other entertainments for the library's residents. Most agents had a live hard, play hard attitude, especially among those who grew up in Survey. I understood why, but it wasn't really my style. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wandered a bit until I ended up at one of the quiet green spaces surrounded by different stores and establishments. I sat on one of the benches in the middle of the park while the lights changed from simulated daylight to the twilight of ship's night. There was a simple water fountain in the middle of a patch of flowers, which scented the air. I closed my eyes and leaned back, just listening to the water falling and the quiet murmur of people at the edge of the park. I tried thinking about the data again, but my mind rebelled and I gave up. 2 days? What do I do until then, I thought. Someone sat down on the other side of the bench. I opened my eyes, turning my head to the side to see who it was. It was a person with long, straight, dark hair, wearing a cobalt blue dress that covered them from neck to ankle, with silver chains around their neck and long earrings of crystal that went down to their shoulders. They were stunning and unusual, since most Survey people tended to wear much more revealing clothing when they decided to party. You look like someone who's at loose ends, they said. Their voice was gentle and soothing. I nodded. I've been ordered by Sonny to take a couple of days off. I see. They crossed their legs, sat back on the bench, and stared at the fountain for a long moment. And that brings you to the servants' area, then? To be honest, I was just wandering. I didn't realize where I'd wandered to. They smiled. Well, lucky me, then. They held out their hand. I'm Blake. I sat forward and took their hand, which was soft and warm. Marcus. Their hand lingered for a moment before they let go. Since it seems you haven't been to our quarter before, Marcus, I'll explain things to you. The first servants of Survey modeled us more after ancient royal courtesans and geishas rather than prostitutes. Servants not only provide for sexual needs, we can be long-term or temporary companions. We learn many forms of entertainment and pursue knowledge. We can talk about a wide range of subjects. I remember learning about the servants during training, but the explanation was more about the rules of conduct. They gave a quiet laugh. Yes, well, the instructors are there to give information. They don't discuss our arts. The servants who work on Sun Tzu are unusual, too. We are contracted with him to keep the secrets of the library like any agent. It allows us to serve you and the other agents better. They uncrossed their legs and moved closer to me on the bench, putting a hand on my shoulder. So, Marcus, since you are at loose ends and I would like some company, why don't we spend some time together? I looked in their eyes and saw warmth and eagerness there. Not just because of their profession, but there seemed to be real interest, too. I nodded in agreement, just as my stomach rumbled. I blushed. They smiled a warm and inviting smile, then stood up and held out their hand again. I know a good restaurant that's still open. We could get a late-night snack. I nodded, took their hand, and we left the park. Chapter 21. Marcus. I do have a confession to make, Blake said while we walked through the gardens. Blake held my hand, leading me somewhere, although I didn't really care where. The dinner was excellent, as they promised, and their company was interesting, gentle, and soothing. Completely different from Lulu's frank abrasiveness. For a few hours, I was able to forget about New York colony, chaos, and anything else outside of just the two of us. "Oh," I said, feeling the tension that I had released during... "Oh," I said, feeling the tension that I had released during dinner crawl back into my shoulders. "Sonny did suggest I come find you. He was worried about you, and when he saw you coming to our quarter, he sent me a message. The AIs have an uncanny knack for matchmaking." I relaxed again. I couldn't be mad at Sonny. Not when he was right. Blake and I really hit it off. I looked up at them and smiled. "So I've heard, and I don't mind. I might have minded more if it had been anyone else." Confessing that surprised me, but it was so easy to talk to Blake. I figured they'd understand. Blake didn't say anything right away, as they led me out of the gardens to a hallway and palmed open the first door. "Lights low," they said. The door opened onto a living room with a kitchenette. Everything was made for comfort. Large, puffy armchairs, an oversized corner couch with crocheted blankets, a dining table with cushioned chairs. I felt welcome just walking into it. "Do you mind taking off your shoes and leaving them near the door?" they asked. I realized then that they'd been barefoot the whole time. I did as they asked, and the door closed behind me. "Make yourself comfortable." They motioned to the couch. "I'll be right out." They went through one of the doors, which I saw was the bathroom. I watched through the open door as they took off their earrings and necklaces, then closed the door. I sat down on the couch and waited. It was pretty obvious what the conclusion of the night would be, so why was I nervous? And why was I relieved that it was Sonny who sent Blake to me and not Lulu? I suppose, if I'm honest with myself, I was a bit hurt by Lulu's rejection, I thought. I sighed as the bathroom door opened again and Blake stepped out. They were still in their dress, but had taken off their jewelry and makeup. They were still stunning without the ornamentation, maybe even more so. I stood up. They came over to the couch and motioned me to sit again. They curled themselves in the corner, and I had the urge to just put my head in their lap. They smiled and opened their arms as if reading my mind. "Come here, Marcus, I don't bite. Unless you want me to." It was almost as if my body moved of its own accord. I crawled over to them and rested my head on their thigh. Blake gave a chuckle and just held me. "I'm guessing this is more of what you need right at the moment, isn't it?" "How did you know?" He played with my hair. "I've been a servant on Sun Tzu for many years, and I can tell when someone needs comfort. The work that you agents do can be brutal. It can do a lot more harm than you realize, especially for more neurotypical people. Maybe even more than Sun Tzu accounts for in his plans, I think. Both the neurotypical and neurodivergent are necessary for the work that you do, and you both have needs between missions. It can be harder for the neurotypical, especially when they're working with neurodivergent partners, because they tend to think that they should be able to act like the neurodivergent and hide their emotions. It doesn't work that way, though. The PTSD and moral injury from your work does take its toll, and you need to be able to talk about it with someone, or it will damage you." "Huh," I said, starting to relax again. "That makes sense. Also, Lulu has a reputation," they said. "She's practically legendary, even among the librarians. Not an easy person to partner with." I laughed. "Yeah, I can see why." I took a breath. "She's fascinating and weird. She's practically sex on stilts. Intellectually, I know who and what she is. I've been working with her for months, wanting her this whole time. But when we talked about having sex the other day, as part of our new legends, I agreed with her when she said it wouldn't be a good idea because I'd get emotionally attached." I snuggled closer into Blake, and they wrapped themselves around me. "Why does that hurt?" "She's a sociopath, Marcus, and when you're in her spotlight, she can be sexy and wonderful, and it can seem like she's all you'd want. But she knows that she can also be cruel. It would be cruel to you even if she didn't intend it, because she can't be what you need. She knows that she would gladly play around with your heart just for the thrill, but it would break you. She has what they call in fairy tales a glamour around her. Her outward self isn't quite real. Lulu's learned to care, but you're not the first heart she's broken. Oh, I said. I couldn't think of anything else to say. Blake shifted so that I laid flat on my back, and they could look into my eyes. Her rejecting you has nothing to do with you as a person, Marcus. It was the right decision for both of you. You are a beautiful person, Marcus, and fully worthy of love, intimacy, and affection. I am? Blake smiled. Most definitely. They leaned forward, their hair making a curtain around us, shutting out the rest of the world, and kissed me gently. I melted into the kiss, finally feeling okay for the first time in weeks. When we stopped, I sat up slowly, then looked them in the eyes. You're stunning, I said, and thank you for what you said. They put their hands on my face. It's all true, Marcus. Believe me. I nodded. I could believe them. They ran their hands under my shirt. I think it's time for bed. I think you're right, I said. We giggled as we tried to get off the couch while still touching each other, then stood and kissed again. Blake led me by the hand to their bedroom, but it was a long time before we actually slept. 2 days later, Blake came with me to the departure lounge as our private Unity cruiser docked. Lulu was already there, suitcase in tow. She smiled and waved at us, but left us to say goodbye. I'll miss you, Blake said. I'll be back. I'm not sure when, though. They smiled their beautiful smile. I'll be here. Call me when you get in. They leaned in and kissed me, then left the lounge. I smiled as I stared after them. Wow, Lulu said. Blake must really like you. Oh, why do you say that? Turning towards Lulu. They're very choosy about who they serve, and they usually don't spend more than one night with someone. Also, they're the head of the servants on Sun Tzu. I raised my eyebrows. Really? Lulu smiled widely. I returned it. Well, I feel doubly fortunate. The door to the docking tube opened, and 2 people in black uniforms came out. We grabbed our bags and walked over to them. Sir, ma'am, my name is Aurelio, and I'll be your pilot for the journey. This is Daria, my first mate. She can stow your luggage. We handed over our suitcases to the first mate, and she disappeared down the docking tube before we could thank her. If you please, Aurelio said. We walked down the docking tube and through the airlock. The private shuttle was well appointed, decorated with comfortable seating, wood paneling, and gold trim. I stashed my briefcase in the overhead compartment, and Lulu added her purse. If you would sit and strap in, we should be on our way in a few minutes. It'll be 2 jumps to Geneva Station, and then we'll be landing on Geneva Colony around 2100 New Zurich time. Thank you, Aurelio, I said. Lulu also thanked him, and he went to the pilot's cabin. Shortly after he went in, Daria came into the main cabin and closed the airlock. I could hear the docking tube disengage. I'm glad you and Blake spent time together. They're really interesting. They are. You know them? I asked. I know all the servants who work on Sun Tzu. I've had quite a few discussions with Blake since they took over from Jonath about 10 years ago. They're a psychologist and worked on Hef for a long time before deciding to take a contract with Sun Tzu. They told me once that they came here because it was quieter, and they feel that their talents are better used here. Anyway, they had a lot of questions about my sociopathy and other neurodivergent agents, and I didn't mind answering them. Not all of us want to talk about our neurodivergent brains. I nodded. They explained a lot to me, actually, I said. I took a deep breath as we moved into 0G. I want to thank you, by the way, for being honest about our legends. Lulu smiled, and from the way she looked at me, I think she understood what I meant. You're welcome, was all she said. Did you manage to find anything new before you took time off? She asked, changing the subject. I shook my head. We won't be able to find anything more until we're on planet. I figured as much. Aurelia's voice came from the speakers in the cabin. We're approaching our first jump point. It'll be 30 minutes to the second. This really is an old clunker, said Lulu. Old? Yeah, it's definitely of Unity make. Most of the newer jump engines we've sent to Unity only have a 5-minute recharge and are more compact. Most ships, even private ones like this one, would have 2 engines. Apparently, this has a much older engine. I guess they want to keep the appearance of Genovian Union Financial being an old bank. No surprise there, I said. Genovians are sticklers for tradition, and if it's not broken, then it's still good. Lulu laughed. Did you grow up on Geneva Colony? No, but I studied at New Zurich University for my undergrad and master's, then worked at the Geneva offices of the Unity Banking Group. They're the ones that hired me to go after Jenny, actually, since they bought out what was left of the New York Colony Bank. I got recruited by UI after that. Then, during my first UI assignment, I was recruited by John Smith. Sort of by kidnapping. Sort of kidnapping? I was a UI plant in a top-secret DoD jump drive project. John Smith captured all of us working on it and torched the lab. She widened her eyes, then nodded. Fools, she spat. Not you, but Unity for trying to make jump drives. It's one of the few things that scare the shit out of me. Me too, I replied. If I never have to see that footage again, that would be a good thing. Wait, he showed you the footage from Loki? I've only heard about it and it scares the crap out of me. Especially after what happened with New Harmony. I nodded. It was about a year before all that happened. John showed it to the scientists to convince them that life in Survey was preferable to death. I assume that worked. That, and the death of one dumbass who, in retrospect, might have been a New Harmonist or influenced by them. Lulu nodded, but didn't comment. I realized it had been a long time since I had thought about the day Sun Tzu accepted me as an agent. I didn't regret my choice then, and I think my life ended up better for it. I put it out of my mind and changed the subject again. Do you know where we're staying? I asked. We have a company apartment this time, within walking distance to the Genovian Union building. I've been there a few times, and it's a nice place. Has a good view of Piz Sherba in the distance. Piz Sherba is incredible. Have you ever been to the top? No, haven't spent enough time on Geneva to go. You? A bunch of us went while I was in uni. The view is incredible, but I don't think it's something I'd want to do a second time. Prefer the quiet life? She teased. No, I hate heights. We both laughed and talked about other things until we landed at the private spaceport of Genovian Union Financial in Geneva. Chapter 22. Marcus. Ugh, I said, pushing back from my desk in the Genovian Union building in New Zurich, where we were both working. Fuck. What? Lulu asked. Chaos is fighting me. Every time I think I might have a source, and I start to dig deeper, suddenly it's a dead end. Sometimes it's pointing to somewhere on the Schweiz continent, but then it points back to New Zurich. Other times it's the opposite. Then it tries to point me off planet. This program is really sophisticated, and almost seems to work like a living organism defending its master. Like a dog? I nodded. Yeah, although more like a pack of chihuahuas all running in different directions and yapping their heads off, I said in frustration. Lulu laughed out loud, making me jump. I stared at her for a minute, then started laughing too. Shit, she said. Now all I can think of is a pack of chihuahuas running in different directions with a bunch of rich New York girls running after them. That mental image made me laugh harder. It took us a few minutes to calm down, because every time I tried to look at Lulu, we'd fall over laughing again. Stop looking at me, she said, gasping. Stop looking at me. I replied, and turned away from her again. After a few minutes, I'd calmed down, so I turned back around. She wiped her eyes and took a breath. "The comms aren't much better," she said. "There are a lot of wealthy people here, but there hasn't been anything out of the ordinary. There's been a few spending above their means, but when I trace them, none of them are computer experts, or have anyone in their employ capable of this level of work. I thought I had tracked down a computer professor at the university that was a possibility, but then the listing of the faculty disappeared off their information site. When I sent a message, they said they didn't know why I couldn't access the listing since it was fine on their end." "Odd." I rolled my chair back to my desk and looked up the site myself. "I can't access it either. Well, it's been a while since I visited my old department, but I bet we could talk to them. I'd know most of them on site anyway." Sweetie, they're not going to recognize you," she pointed out. "Oh, right," I sighed. "Maybe we could tell them that we're looking to do a security collaboration between them and Genovian Union?" That could work. We could ask Levy about it." She looked at her wristcom. "You know what? It's almost 3 anyway. Why don't we get out of here for now? Go find Levy and get some dinner." "You're as bad as Uncle Sonny." "I did grow up with him, so..." He laughed. "Well, true." I packed up my tablet and data keys, and Lulu packed her purse. We left our office and went down to Levy's. I knocked on the door. Levy waved us in as he finished a video message. "Yes, Frank, I'll send a technician out to you right away. They should be there in about a week. You'll need to put a hold on new accounts until they diagnose the problem. I'd get them out to you faster if I could bend the laws of physics, but I'm not that much of a miracle worker. I will talk with you in a week." He tapped a control on his desk and sent the message. "Hello, friends." "Hey, Levy," Lulu said. "It's quitting time. Up for dinner?" "Sure. Where are we going?" he asked. I shrugged. "Haven't decided yet." "Raclette?" I groaned. "Again?" Lulu laughed. "Oh, come on. You can't tell me you don't like it. Melted cheese over, well, everything? It's perfect food for us." "She's right, you know," Levy said. "I'll teach you a new trick, too." I gave an exaggerated sigh. Fine, let's go." Levy smiled widely as he turned off his desk and grabbed his jacket. We followed him out. The restaurant had a private room, so we could talk relatively freely. Levy seemed to know the owners of all the restaurants in New Zurich that had private dining rooms. Then again, I knew Levy had been working this legend for a long time. He was practically a New Zurich fixture and got invited to a lot of upper-class functions. It also didn't hurt that he was head of security and privacy for the second biggest bank in the colonies. I put another slice of cheese in my little pan and put it under the grill to melt. I explained to Levy the idea of a collaboration with the university computer department. "That's a good idea. Write up the proposal in the morning and we'll set up the meeting for tomorrow afternoon to pitch it to them. The directors have been batting a similar idea around for a while now anyway, so now's as good a time as any to actually start talking to them about it." "Okay, I'll do it first thing," I said. Lulu was smiling to herself while she poured her pan of melted cheese over boiled potatoes. She took a spoon and dolloped more of the sweet and spicy mustard fruit on her plate. I could tell her mind was light years away, or maybe just completely submerged in cheese. "I think we're boring Laura, Matt," said Levy. I grinned. Not completely, I think." "You know me all too well, sweetie," she said, eating one of the potatoes with a flourish. My mind was elsewhere. Marcus grinned. "Levy was just saying I should write a proposal in the morning, and that maybe we could set up a meeting for the afternoon." "Would that work? Timing-wise, I mean." I nodded. "It's a university. They keep odd hours. I'm sure we could find someone to talk to in early evening." If it gets too late, we could always take them and some of their students to dinner. Yes, university folks always like free food, said Levy. That I can relate to, said Lulu, taking a sip of her wine. So, are you two coming to the apartment, or are you going to Levy's? I looked at my wristcom, surprised to see that it was nearly 1800. Ugh, my sense of time is all messed up. Going from a 24-hour day to a 20-hour day still seems weird to me, even though I spent several years here. I looked at Levy, who smiled. I shrugged. It doesn't matter to me where. We'll go to your apartment, it's closer, and we can work from there in the morning on the proposal, he said. Good, said Lulu. I think I'll avail myself of the local nightlife and see what I can turn up. I nodded. Sounds like a plan, then. We finished our dinner and then went our separate ways. In the morning, Levy and I got up relatively early and started working on the collaboration proposal. About an hour before we were to go back to the office, Lulu came out of her bedroom leading a small woman on a leash. Levy and I both looked up, watched her kiss the woman, take off the leash and collar, and then lead her to the door. Lulu said something to her quietly, and then the woman left. Good morning, she greeted us with a satisfied smile as she closed the door and dialed in some breakfast for herself. Morning. I see you had a good night of it, I teased. She smiled. Most definitely. And got an interesting tidbit of information as well. Did you know there have been no new harmonists on Geneva Colony, nor any new harmonist influence groups? I raised my eyebrows, and Levy looked thoughtful. That's right, Levy said. Uncle Sonny sent me the Praesia and the new harmonists and asked me to look out for them, but there was never anything to report. Maybe Chaos was protecting its home planet? I theorized. Or its creators? Lulu said. Possibly. Levy took a sip of his coffee as Lulu brought her breakfast to the table. It is interesting, said Levy. Geneva Colony has always been very stable. Generally decent politicians, good trade, especially with coffee and chocolate, and a lot of banking, research, and agriculture. Even after what happened at Unity Hub a couple of years ago, there really wasn't any hint of the recession that hit the other colonies. Colony culture is generally anti-fanatics of that stripe, but even still, you'd think that there'd be some of the new harmonists here, even if they were trying to get away from the chaos of Unity Hub. I said, putting that together with what I remembered of the data in my head. Lulu got her food out of the printer and another cup of coffee. Levy's tablet chimed. Ah, the head of the computer department says he can see us at 1400. It's about a 45-minute ride from the office by car. I'll need to go in soon so I can take care of some other business before we go. I nodded. Then once you're ready, Laura, we can head in. Don't worry, darling. It won't take me that long to get ready, she said with a smirk. I laughed, finished my own coffee, and went to get ready myself. Levy followed me into the bedroom. Is she always that sarcastic? He asked. Only when she's hungry, really, I said. She is a very unusual woman. I've only met her a few times and mostly knew her by reputation. She's something of a legend among agents, especially among those of us who do planet-side work. So I've been told. I think some of that reputation is deserved, but Lulu's just as human as the rest of us, if wired a bit differently. Different is right, he said, then pulled me in for a kiss. We should get moving. Then stop kissing me. Levy smiled. For now, then. He headed to the bathroom. I grinned. We went through more data in the office until it was time to leave. Levy programmed the air car, as he knew the city better than me and Lulu. We talked about dinner and weekend plans on the trip to the university. I was sitting in the back seat of the air car. Levy was in the driver's side seat, since Lulu insisted that she sit in the passenger seat. The autopilot had just stopped at a red light about halfway to campus when suddenly the light turned green again. That's odd, I thought. I was looking out the window when another car came barreling down the cross street. Our air car had pulled forward into the intersection in front of it, and then time slowed down. I could see the face of the driver of the other car. They put their hands up to their face as the two cars collided. I saw the breaking glass, but didn't hear any sound as the window shattered and the metal popped. Shit, I thought as the world faded to black. Chapter 23. Giannis. Son of a bitch, I swore as I went through the code for the third time on my experimental server. I moved my chair away from the desk, staring at the screen. This is so frustrating. I wasn't finding anything wrong with the code, and I couldn't figure out why it had evolved the way it did on the public servers. I activated the air movement on my chair and went out to the front porch. I breathed in the fresh air and just looked out over the fields and grass. The cowbells were sounding, as most of the cows were in the pasture. I sighed, then moved my left arm in the exercise sequence the physical therapist had taught me. I had to move something, even if it was just my arm. Hey, Giannis, said Kai behind me. Hey, I said. Nico down? Kai leaned on the railing of the porch. Yeah, he's telling his George a nap time story. He'll probably be out in a few minutes. I smiled. Of course. We both watched the red stem grass and wheat blowing in the breeze. The summer air was always cool, even where we were, since we were close to the shadow of the Shard, which loomed over the whole continent of Schweiz. You could see the sheer cliff face from kilometers away, even from New Zurich on the other continent. The mountain had always been intriguing to me, especially since the summit was in space. Nico and I were the only ones in the family who hadn't been to the top. Nico, because he was too little, and me, because I had my accident the year I could have gone up for the first time. I sighed. Kai turned his head towards me. Still can't work out what's going on? I shook my head. Is this gonna get us in trouble? He asked. I don't know. It might. I think we should tell the family just in case. Tell them what? That we've been running a quasi-legal program to make us money and that it's now made us much more than we thought? That's going to go over too well. Of course they're going to be mad, but if the money gets traced back to us, there'd be at least an investigation. They'd have to be prepared for that, and for the fact that our income is going to go way down. Not enough that we couldn't deal with it, but we'd have to be much more frugal than we have been. It's been a long time since we'd had to live that way, Kai. The only way they could charge us with something is to prove that we did illegal trading, and you assured me that you made it so it obeyed all the rules I told you. He stood up and turned to face me. Are you telling me that it might have done illegal trading all by itself? I don't know, Kai. I don't have complete data, and it'll be weeks before I get any off-planet data. I don't see anything on Geneva. It all looks normal here. But the fact that it's added more to our portfolio on its own worries me about what it's doing elsewhere. I mean, it's a genetic algorithm, so it generally does some weird things. It's the nature of the beast. I thought I coded it so that I accounted for that. It shouldn't have gotten away from us. Kai crossed his arms and looked thoughtful. I don't think we should tell them yet. Not until we know for sure what happened. I don't know, Kai. Do you really want to deal with a pissed-off family when we can't even tell them what exactly is going to happen? We don't even know if we've actually broken any laws. I didn't say anything to that. Kai wasn't wrong. I just sighed. Listen, I'm going to call Uncle Ben over to look after you and Nico. I'm going to go into the bush for the weekend. I need to think. Okay, Kai, I said, resigned. He's at least taking the threat seriously, I thought. He turned and went back into the house. I resumed looking out over the fields. I saw storm clouds forming in the distance, starting to blot out the rising Kleinmond. I sighed and went back to my office to go over the code yet again, even though I knew it would be useless. About 30 minutes later, there was a knock at my office door. I blanked my screen and said, "Come in." Uncle Ben came in. I always envied the fact that Uncle Yuri married a man who just always seemed to be smiling, even when things were tough. Uncle Yuri assured me his husband did have his moments, but if he did, Ben only showed it to Uncle Yuri. "Hey, Giannis, is Kai okay? He looked upset when he left, but he said he was fine." "Yeah, he'll be okay. He just wants to go and think about things. I think my last round of 'you should get a life' the other day got to him a bit." Uncle Ben sat down. Well, yeah. I wish he would stop blaming himself for what happened to you. It's not healthy." I sighed. "You know that, and I know that, but he seems to think that helping me is his duty, even though we could hire someone to come in and do everything he's doing." "Yes, but you did save his life." "Yeah." Memories of the accident came unbidden, and I tensed as they replayed in my mind. The flash flood from the freak storm made a raging river of the dry stream bed that they were playing in. Giannis watched Kai get swept under as the water hit him. Giannis started running with the flow and held his breath as the water overtook him. Being a champion swimmer, he had the strength to swim with the current and hold his breath for a long time. When he finally emerged from the water, he looked frantically for Kai, who had only just started his swim lessons. Giannis finally saw Kai's bright blue shirt in the muddy orange water. "Hold on, Kai, I'm coming!" he yelled, not sure if Kai had heard him or not. He swam harder to try and get to Kai, who was struggling to keep his head above water. He managed to dodge most of the debris that was carried along with the current. After what seemed like an eternity, he was able to grab onto Kai's shirt and pull him closer, then roll him onto his side to keep Kai's head above water. Kai coughed as Giannis kicked as hard as he could to get them to the shore. He grabbed onto the stones and even clumps of redstone grass and managed to shove Kai onto the bank. "Climb up, Kai!" he shouted above the noise. Kai did as he was told, and as he turned to help Giannis, another surge of water carrying a large tree trunk came barreling into Giannis, slamming his back against the rock they had used as leverage to stay on the shore. Giannis let out a yell, and Kai tried to pull him out from under the tree, but he was pinned. Before he passed out from the pain, he could hear Kai yelling into his wristcom while holding onto Giannis's shirt. He vaguely remembered the paramedics carefully strapping him to a board and asking him some questions, but then the world went dark. "Giannis?" Yes? You went away for a moment," he said. "Where'd you go?" I was remembering the accident." The older man nodded. Uncle Ben had been a therapist for his first career, and still kept himself credentialed, even though he was more of a farmer now. Around me, though, he tended to flip into therapist mode, and it half made me wonder if I was the reason he kept his credentials. As if I need more therapy, I thought, uncharitably. "I'm not going to talk about it," I said. "I didn't say you had to," Uncle Ben said. "You had the therapist look on." "Well, you don't expect this tabby to change his stripes, do you? Especially when you're having an obvious flashback." "But it was over 25 years ago. Shouldn't I be over having flashbacks by now?" "Brains are weird, Giannis, you know that. Especially when it comes to trauma. You'll never be over it. But you do live with it. You cope. Kai's coping by doing what he thinks he should do for you to pay back the debt, no matter what you think about it." I sighed. Yeah. I wish that was all of why Kai was heading to the woods this time, but I didn't say anything more. Uncle Ben looked like he was going to say more, but Nico started crying in the other room. "Saved by the toddler yell," he said with a wink. I grinned, and Uncle Ben left my office. I stared at my desk, then went out into the living room. I heard little toddler feet running from the bedroom and lowered and locked my chair. When his little face peeked around the couch, he came running over, George in tow. "Uncle Yana!" Nico said, handing me George. I took the plushie with my left hand and moved it out of the way so he could climb up. "Hello, Nico Lee. Did you have a good nap?" Yeah, he said, raising his hands towards George when he was settled. I gave him back the plushie, then put my arm around him. Uncle Ben went to the kitchen and looked to be making some sort of snack. Uncle Yana, said Nico. Yes, Nicolai. Where Uncle Kai? He went to stay in the woods for a few days. He'll be back soon. Oh. Nico seemed to be thinking hard about something, so I just waited. Uncle Yana, is Uncle Kai sad? I think he might be a little bit. Adults get sad sometimes. Oh, you get sad? Sometimes, Nicolai. Are you sad now? I raised my eyebrows, amazed at how perceptive Nico could be. I was, but now you're here and I'm happy, I said with a smile. Why sad? Uncle Ben looked over his shoulder from the stove with a grin. I sighed. Well, I was remembering something sad from a long time ago, before you were born. Oh, Nico said, then pushed George against my chest. Here, you need George, I play. He climbed down and went over to his toy box, pulling some out. Surprised, I just held George while Nico played with his toys. Hey, Nico, want a biscuit? Uncle Ben said. Yeah, answered Nico as he ran into the kitchen. Ben held a plate of biscuits and a cup and set them on the table. Nico sat down and began to eat. Ben then went to the printer and brought over 2 coffees. He eyed the plushie on my lap as he set my coffee on my tray and chuckled. Should we get you your own, George? Would it be as effective? Actually, it might. Although, I will say that having a toddler give you a plushie is cute as hell. I laughed. I'll think about it. I'd probably get a different color, though. Green! Shouted Nico. Green? I asked. George, only green. You only get green, George, the toddler said, in all seriousness. That's you told, said Uncle Ben, trying hard not to laugh. All right, Nicolai. If I get my own George, I'll get a green one. Good, Nico said, returning to his biscuits. Now you have to get one, said Uncle Ben. I smiled. I suppose I do. I looked at Nico, glad to have the little one in my life. I just hoped that I would be able to actually see him grow up instead of seeing him from a jail cell. Don't think about that yet, Giannis, I told myself. You still haven't been caught. Somehow, that thought wasn't comforting. You have been listening to Tales from Flat Space. If you want to support me in my writing, there are many ways to do it. Share this podcast, follow me on my Twitch channel, or buy my books. All you have to do is go to revginapon.net and click on the relevant links. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.